Good evening, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to News in Focus. My name is Faraz, but I would like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us on Hilaal TV, TSTV channel 347. Well, 2025 once again presented us with a political year to speak about on so many occasions. And of course, it scratches the surface. 1 year before that was the provincial and national elections, and of course, from that we got the government of national unity. But now as we look to the 2026 local government elections, we need to see or analyze how it's going to play out there. Because it is the metros, it's the municipalities which affect us as citizens of that respective metro. How will this play out? Are we seeing a decline within the African National Congress and the Democratic Alliance? Are these new parties going to step up and probably deliver, if given the chance, what maybe these historical or legacy parties have failed to do so? Joining me now to take this discussion forward, he is a heavyweight within the political scene, the analytics, the commentary, the understanding of it. It's none other than Aubrey Matshiqi. Aubrey, absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us. Tokoza to you also, Baba. I look at the year 2025, Aubrey, and with 31 years into democracy, if somebody had to ask you the question, review it for us, how would you look at the political system within our country right now?
Well, we had the watershed moment last year when the ANC fell below 50%, and the government of national unity was formed as a result. And what we wanted to see this year is whether the GNU would consolidate and become equal to the task of delivering on the promise of a better life for all South Africans. The reality, however, is that the GNU is underperforming. When you look at indicators like unemployment, inequality, crime, and so on. And in places like Johannesburg, the local state or local government is even failing to provide basic services like water, like electricity, and so on. But the critical thing for me is that at the center of the GNU are two parties, the ANC and the DA, the Democratic Alliance. Now, stability of this GNU depends on whether together and separately the ANC and the DA are stable or not. Now, the DA itself is going into its federal congress in April next year. Already you are seeing reactions inside. There are reactions inside the ANC too. So what is important for me is whether the two parties can be the center that hold on the GNU, keep it together, and keep it stable. Because if they can't, then we have the next question. Will the GNU have a higher or lower approval rating than the ANC? Will it have a lower or higher approval rating than the DA? If you look at it from the perspective of either party in relation to next year's local government election will win sizable support if voters come to the view that, for instance, the ANC has a higher approval rating than the GNU, or the DA has a higher approval rating than the GNU. In my view, the ANC will be lucky to win any metro out of the 8. The only metro that I think the ANC will win is Buffalo City in the Eastern Cape, but will underperform in all the other 7. This may be a precursor to what's going to happen in 2029. My own assessment is that in next year's local government election, the ANC will fall below 50% of national support. And that will flow into the 2029 general election, in which election I think they will trend around 35% or even less.
You know what's the interesting part of this, Aubrey, is that look at the disagreements that have come. Bella Bill, land expropriation, NHI. And then, of course, we had what I think was really the one that was the big explosion where you saw the massive disagreements was the VAT hike. And already there you could see that the ANC and the DA could not come to an agreement even if they are sitting within this very same governing structure. How did you assess that? Because it really wasn't going to be plain sailing given the ideologies that both parties respectively have.
It was not my expectation that the GNU will collapse because of the disagreements between the ANC and the DA. They both need the government of national unity. Now, if you look at what they disagreed over, as you say, NHI, the DA raises also the question of employment equity,
Yes.
or DEI,
Yes,
as Trump would call it. Now, none of the disagreements, when I look at the different issues, none of the disagreements have been and are going to be fatal in relation to the GNU. In other words, it is my expectation that the GNU will survive the disagreements between the ANC and the DA. Also must bear in mind, what brought us here are the interests of capital, particularly white capital. I argued before the 2024 election that the outcome of the 2024 election will be dictated by the interests of capital. Effectively, the GNU is a coalition that was forced on both on the ANC and the DA by capital. And therefore, whether the ANC and the DA stay together, to some extent, will depend on the interests of capital.
You mentioned capital, and I want to bring in one aspect which I'm surprised we haven't seen the DA supposedly have a disagreement with on the issue on Palestine. The genocide that is happening there with the ICJ case, South Africa says it's continuing with it. But I want to bring in just that very same portfolio, which is international relations. What we saw are parties within the GNU, for example, the Patriotic Alliance and the DA making a trip to Israel, which of course brought a lot of questions in terms of them going against probably a GNU charter, which from a South African government perspective is its solidarity with Palestine, number one, and of course the maintaining of the ICJ case. How do you assess that? Because those are two parties, and of course there's even the Freedom Front where they're kind of leaning towards a more pro-Israel sort of approach. What was your assessment on that? Or actually, what is your assessment on that currently? Because those three parties, the Patriotic Alliance, the DA, and the Freedom Front Plus, see it very differently to maybe parties like the Good Party, the ANC, the Pan-African Congress, who have a pro-Palestine stance to things.
Well, globally, what tends to happen in relation to citizens is that foreign policy is almost always trumped by domestic policy. So to the extent that we did expect that the ANC and the DA will cohere, there'll be a measure of agreement between them when it comes to economic policy. Because in my view, the DA and the ANC, when it comes to economic policy, are two sides of the same coin.
Yes.
So we did expect them to cohere around economic policy. And we did expect them to differ when it comes to foreign policy in general. Now, what has happened, as we expected, some of us, is that domestic policy, that is the extent to which the GNU can deliver on the promise of a better life, that has trumped foreign policy because citizens are focusing more on domestic policy than foreign policy, which meant, again, that whatever disagreement exists between the ANC and the DA, or between the ANC on the one hand and other parties over foreign policy in general, and the question of Palestine in particular, was not going to be fatal in relation to the survival of the GNU.
So we can say that there's some sort of agreement on that, or is that something maybe parties like the DA and the Patriotic Alliance would say, well, we'll shift it to the side, rather focus on the domestic issues, for example, the economy?
Well, parties like the Patriotic Alliance, it's very clear that they are both in the pockets of and fall within the pro-Israeli lobby.
That's quite clear.
That's very clear. Some of us may even argue that a party like the Patriotic Alliance has been bought to be part of the pro-Israeli lobby. Then you have parties like the ACTP, the African Christian Democratic Party, which are misguided in a sense historically because they confuse the state of Israel with historical Israel. They think those are the same thing when they are not. So the Zionists, they are uncritical of the Zionist agenda of the current Israeli state. So they, as Christians, think they are doing the Christian thing because they are, for them to support Israel is to do the Christian thing. And they don't realize that the Israeli apartheid state is not historical Israel.
And I think that's quite an important aspect with regards to that. But Aubrey, we are going to be coming after the break because our discussion is going to focus on the state of the political class within South Africa. And as my guest has mentioned a number of times, the understanding of the deep state and how it fits within the South African context. Do stay tuned to News in Focus. Welcome back to News in Focus. I'm still in conversation with renowned political analyst Aubrey Matshiqi. Aubrey, you've always mentioned the words deep state, and I'm glad that we have you here because it really gives an understanding to where we are as a country right now and the role of politicians in the deciding of legislature and the overall governance of it. 31 years into democracy, how can South Africa be described as this deep state right now?
Well, one of the things I've complained about is a very narrow conception of state capture that seem to impel us in the direction of instituting the Zondo Commission, in fact. But by so doing, we ignore something very important, that the dominant economic interests in the world, not just in South Africa, globally, one of the things they want to pursue their interests is to reproduce that dominance. And one of the ways in which they reproduce that dominance is to capture continents, regions, and capture states. And therefore, a much broader understanding of state capture, I thought, was required for us to understand what is really happening in the world and in South Africa. But when you come to South Africa, we have another problem. We have an interesting version of state capture, to the extent that in South Africa you have the confluence of political, criminal, intelligence, business, and other interests coming together in pursuit of the common goal of making a lot of money. And how do they make this money? By looting the state. So you have politicians, senior government officials, rogue elements in the intelligence services, rogue elements in business, and criminal syndicates working together in pursuit of this common goal. And we're here today where we're talking about senior police officers being captured, politicians being captured, precisely because one of the problems we have is that of the deep state. Another way in which the deep state manifests in South Africa is through two kinds of crime, organized crime and organized corruption. So if you look at a place like Ekurhuleni, where all sorts of revelations are coming out in relation to corruption in the, let's say, the Ekurhuleni Metropolitan Police, what we see there is the confluence of organized crime and organized corruption. Now, organized corruption happens when syndicates capture departments. It can be the Department of Home Affairs, it can be the Department of Health, as we see in Tembisa, or EMPD in Ekurhuleni. That's organized corruption. But Ekurhuleni is a very perfect example of how organized corruption can become organized crime. So in Eguruleni and in other places, you are going to see this organized corruption of people who work in departments morphing into organized crime. But there's something much more dangerous that I think is happening. Most South Africans experience the corruption of the police at the level of the police station, not at the level of the police general. Because what you have there, criminal syndicates at a local level have captured police officers at the level of the local police station, which means areas like the inner city in places like Johannesburg and Durban are areas that have fallen outside the control of the state because they are controlled by criminal syndicates who have captured police at the level of the police station. The problem with having these zones that are controlled by syndicates and corrupt police officers is that they become liberated zones that fall outside the authority of the state. And these are areas from which attacks on the state can be launched. So the deep state has also morphed into these manifestations I'm talking about at local level.
You know, Bob Aubrey, I think about South Africa and how, of course, this rotting corruption. I listened to a podcast that you did with another former colleague of mine, and you mentioned that this also happened during the liberation, that there were certain individuals themselves that were captured, or the sort of criminal elements started creeping in there. But when I look at the arms deal, I always feel that's where it started, within the democratic part of South Africa. So when we speak of state capture or the sort of criminal elements creeping up the political class, it wasn't just obviously what we see in the Zondo Commission, be it the Gupta family or Bosasa, so on and so forth. This was way prior to that actually happening.
Well, you know Summer Place, which is not far from here,
Yes.
which used to be the house of a member of the Italian mafia, Chiavelli. Now, Chiavelli ends up here after running away as a fugitive from justice in Italy.
Yeah.
So this member of the Italian mafia is a fugitive who comes here, and he captures some National Party or apartheid politicians. So the capture of politicians or the political class by criminals is not something new. We saw it during apartheid in the relationship, as I say, between this member of the mafia, Chiavelli, and senior politicians in the National Party. But if you look at what is happening today, some of the relationships between criminals and politicians started during the liberation struggle. So some of these criminals or criminal networks started with these relations during apartheid, and the relationships have continued post-apartheid. But the capture of politicians itself is not something new in our history, unfortunately.
And that's the thing, because everyone seems to, and again, this is not washing away what the Gupta family had done, but everyone believes that it started, and the Guptas landed in South Africa and, of course, established this relationship with former President Jacob Zuma. But you can see this having an effect even prior to that, the arms deal being one of them. And this was, of course, done by conglomerates, arms conglomerates like Thales and so on. So there we are already having a major issue. I think it only really manifested itself quite largely around the 2014-15 area when, of course, the term state capture really became the sort of talking point within the South African public.
Well, there are things we're not going to talk about, depending on the complexion of the criminal.
Exactly.
For instance, we're not going to talk about corporate capture, the corruption of corporations. Now, if you look at Open Secrets, they did a study recently in which they show that people who are executives in the financial sector in our economy, what happens to them? When they leave the financial sector as executives, they join the Reserve Bank or National Treasury.
Yeah.
What do you call? Why do they go there? Because they want to control and shape the content of policy.
Yes.
So what are they engaged in? Regulatory capture.
Yeah.
They are there to capture the regulatory and policy space. We don't talk about that.
Rand manipulation being one of them.
Exactly.
Yes.
We don't talk about that because of the complexion of those who are criminals or who are part of the corruption. The Guptas, I became quite unpopular because I said the Guptas are the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. I remember that, yes.
Because my argument was, if you must look at the totality of corruption in South Africa or corporate capture of parts of the state, the Guptas are just a subset of that problem. In fact, when it comes to the capture of the state, particularly the regular, remember, you have those who steal directly.
Yes.
And you have those who steal through policy.
Policy, yeah.
And that is why I talk about policy askaris.
I look at Bosasa also, and I'm busy reading a book by Carl Cowan called The Mafia Land, and Bosasa's name comes up quite a lot.
Yes.
And they were, of course, white South Africans that were part, or they say they were part of the liberation struggle at the time, or funded the liberation struggle at the time. And I think when you look at state capture, you mention the color of the skin, and I just feel that it's so unfair that it's reduced to people of color rather than, white South Africans. And I do think that people need to really understand that it can happen across all spheres of society.
Well, let me give you another example. Donald Trump.
Yes.
We are told that Donald Trump is transactional.
Yes.
If Donald Trump was black, we're not going to use the word transactional. We'd say he is corrupt.
Corrupt, yeah.
So when corporates, white corporates or corporations engage in corruption, we call it things like collusion.
Collusion, yeah.
When black people engage
Yeah.
in that kind of behavior,
Yeah.
we call it corruption.
Corruption. But Aubrey, I'll stop you there because one of the interesting parts is that when it was Steinhoff, it was called an accounting mismanagement. When it was VBS,
Exactly.
it was called looting. And I find that to be probably the worst sort of comparison when it comes to that. Again, given the two different types of conglomerates that they were. Well, after the break, we're going to be shifting the focus to the local government elections. And I said it at the start of the introduction, it's going to affect us as a citizen because municipalities and metros, really, that is the election that's going to determine the basic services that you get as a citizen. News in Focus returns after the break. Welcome back to News in Focus. Bob, Aubrey, the local government elections, and like I mentioned in my intro, and of course before we go to the break, those are really the elections that affect the service delivery in the municipality and the metro that you reside in. How much was 2016 when we really saw the decline of the African National Congress in key metros, the precursor to where we are right now in the year 2025 heading into 2026?
Well, the state in general is weak. The local state, or what we call local government, is even weaker. And in a sense, the weakening of the local state and the state in general coincide with the weakness of the ANC. Now, as I said earlier, my expectation is that when it comes to national support, in the local government election, the ANC is going to fall below 50. Prefiguring what's going to happen in 2029. There's going to be an interesting battle in Johannesburg. You have Helen Zille, who's going to be a key figure in that battle. We saw what happened at the weekend The current mayor lost the battle to be chairperson of the ANC in Joburg. I can tell you now, he's not going to be mayor for long. The newly elected chairperson
Loyiso
of the
Masuku.
ANC, that's the next mayor.
Do you think it will be done as early as 2026?
It will be done next year. Definitely.
Because I look at it, when you look at Dada Morero, I don't think there's confidence within that very same Johannesburg council within him. A few weeks ago, there was the motion of no confidence, and of course Al Jamaa and the UDM who brought it, all of a sudden retracted it. Now, my understanding to this is that it supposedly gave them some leeway for the ANC Johannesburg conference to occur, to allow for Loyiso Masuku to come, which could, of course, as you mentioned, allow for her to be brought in and obviously be the ANC's leading contestant for the elections. But I want to touch on Helen Zille, Bob Aubrey.
Yes.
Here's my challenge. It's the age scenario. I'm thinking she's in her 70s.
Yes.
No doubt she's got the supposed political wit to carry it. But in a city where the youth really has a sort of dominance to this, has the DA missed a trick in that?
Well, the fact that Helen Zille can be a candidate in Joburg at her age speaks to what I've been talking about, that we have tended to focus on the crisis in the ANC or on the crisis the ANC has become, instead of focusing on the fact that South Africa is going through a generalized political crisis. And that is why, from the perspective of the citizen, when you look at the ANC and the DA, citizens are looking for an alternative to both the ANC and the DA. To that extent, therefore, the DA is not the answer and the ANC is not the answer. What that means is that, yes, you now have this new chairperson of the ANC in Johannesburg, Loyiso Masuku. Loyiso Masuku is not going to save the ANC. The ANC is going to trend lower than it did in 2021. The question is whether Helen Zille will help the DA to do better than it did in 2021. There's an important trick Helen Zille is missing. The DA is opposed to redress. They are opposed to DEI. Some of the main beneficiaries of these policies of redress belong to the black middle class. So the DA, through its anti-redress attitude, is alienating the black middle class. And these are the people who had started gravitating towards the DA. Because it is clear that the ANC is losing the support of the working class, particularly the black working class. But the black middle class was beginning to gravitate towards the DA, which means, if I'm right in saying that they are alienating the black middle class, they will not trend where they want to trend in Joburg. So the DA may trend higher than it did in 2021, but it is not going to win an absolute majority in Joburg. In fact, there is no party that is going to win an absolute majority in Joburg. Joburg ends up with a coalition again. The question is whether it's going to be a coalition at the center of which lies the DA and the ANC. That's the question.
You know, Bob Aubrey, coalitions, and this is, of course, where what we see in the metros is this merry-go-round of mayors occurring. It happens in Ekurhuleni,
Yes.
Johannesburg, Tshwane.
Tshwane.
It's quite clear that happens. And I looked at Johannesburg, and I think we had 5 or 6 mayors, if I stand to be corrected, since 2021.
Yes.
I don't think that's good for governance. It can't be good for governance because there is really a lack of stability that comes within this. And that's a concern. How do you view it in that regard?
You can come at it from two directions. You can say the day before an election and the day after the election must look the same.
Sure.
And they can look the same. You know why? If the administration remains intact. In other words, if our focus is on the administration before the day of the election and after will be the same administration. And therefore, there should be no instability. The problem is that there is instability at the level of politics, of the political. And therefore, the interface between the administrative and the political causes instability to the extent that the political interferes when it comes to the administrative.
Yes.
So you are right. It's not good for governance because the interface between the political and the administrative causes instability. In a situation where there is no such interference by the political when it comes to the administrative, the day before an election and the day after an election will be the same because it doesn't matter which party is in charge. It also doesn't matter how a coalition is configured if the administration is stable. The problem we have in places like Joburg is that the administration cannot be stable because the political is still very important when it comes to the interface between the two.
And you bring up something important there, Bob Aubrey, is that I since 2021, and I'm focusing on Johannesburg, and of course this is not us ignoring Ekurhuleni or Tshwane. When I look at Johannesburg, because obviously it's the the financial hub of our country, in terms of the political, so either whether it was Ace Magashule or Fikile Mbalula speaking on behalf of the ANC within that city, Helen Zille would do the very same for the DA, and then Khalif Hendricks would do that for Al Jamaa. And I thought, can there not be the sort of micromanagement that is occurring? Can the representatives of their parties within the chamber not speak for themselves or make decisions for themselves? And therein lies the issue. And you bring up such an important part. The politics dictates how the governance of the actual metro is going to help. And that really doesn't assist in what the citizen or the resident wants, service delivery.
That's very true. There's something else. We call it local government. And we're going to have a local government election. But actually, to some extent, the outcome of a local government election is shaped by national issues.
Yes.
So in a sense, also when it comes to the different parties at local government level, what is going on at national level within those parties does influence what's going on within those parties at local level, and that in turn influences what goes on in local government.
Yes. For the resident out there, their biggest question is, how huge is this 2026 local government election going to be? Because if you look at the framework of the GNU, I think we all need to prepare, and you've mentioned it, for another coalition. What is your view on coalitions within the metros right now? And again, this is not a new thing. It's been there, of course, since 2021. For other metros, it's been there since 2026. Are we still at a stage where we can look at coalitions? And of course, our democracy and the Constitution allows for that to happen. Are we still at the stage where we can say a coalition is good for a metro because the robustness of debate and the challenging of governance allows for that to happen?
Sometimes we confuse noise with the robustness of the debate.
Yes.
You have a lot of noise, but the content is poor. Now, in the foreseeable future, our future is a future of coalitions at national, provincial, and local level. The question is this: how do we reconfigure coalitions in such a way that they can be beneficial when it comes to the democratic dividend for the citizen? For instance, one of the reasons coalitions in places like Joburg and elsewhere are unstable is because a tiny party can influence an entire coalition. In other words, we need to craft legislation that will govern coalitions at national, provincial, and local level,
Yes.
which will include things like thresholds. That below a certain threshold, you can't have the level of power and influence a small party has in a place like Joburg. For instance, you can say below 5%, your party cannot be represented in council
Sure.
or provincial legislature or national assembly. So I do think we need to craft legislation to govern coalitions better.
After the break, I wrap up my conversation with Aubrey Matshiqi as we look ahead, or still keep the discussion on the local government elections, but is the legacy parties like the ANC and the Democratic Alliance, the two dominant ones within the country, still seen in the eyes of the citizen and the resident as the party that they will put their vote forward to in terms of delivering that service delivery and governance within the country. Do stay tuned to News in Focus. Welcome back to News in Focus. Bob Aubrey, I want to, before we touch on obviously matters here in terms of dominance of parties, there's something interesting you mentioned that we should talk about is artificial intelligence. And of course, within the G20 context, many of the nations, if not all, have come to the agreement within this declaration that artificial intelligence is seen as an important tool of economic growth. How do you view it?
Well, when you look at the world economy, particularly the American economy and its influence on the world economy, we have this problem. You have a concentration of wealth in a few hands, and that concentration of wealth buys political power.
Yes.
And that political power is used to do what? To buy more concentration of wealth. So it's secular in that way.
Sure.
Now, a lot of that wealth, which is in small hands, is in the hands of companies like Meta,
Yes.
Apple, NVIDIA, and so on. And that concentration is giving birth to another concentration. That concentration of wealth is buying dominance when it comes to AI. Now, there are many good things that AI will deliver, but there are two things I worry about. First of all, a colonial mindset is still driving the development of AI. It's an extractive logic when it comes to energy
Yes.
and water. And it's an extractive logic when it comes to the exploitation of human resources. The same places that were victims of colonialism or coloniality are the same places that are victims of this extractive logic when it comes to the development of AI. So that's my first worry. My second worry is that by some estimates, within a decade, AI shall have reached the AGI level, artificial general intelligence. Beyond that, the level of super intelligence, which means we are probably at a stage where AI is already more intelligent than human intelligence. As it transitions towards AGI, which will transition towards super intelligence. Now the question is, those who through their wealth will control AI and dominate the world through AI, how is this going to affect the world economy, first of all? One thing is certain, again, Africa is going to be left behind. So in short, my worry is that the dominance over AI is also going to be used to reproduce this dynamic I'm talking about, where wealth is concentrated in a few hands, and that wealth is used to buy political dominance, and the political dominance is used to buy more wealth.
You know, it was the interesting part of this, Bob Aubrey. Philip K. Dick, who of course, wrote a lot of novels when it came to dystopian future.
Yes.
Had mentioned really, you know, how much, you know, artificial intelligence, of course, what he would call at the time cloning, would really have quite a huge impact on the world. But of course, we will, be watching that and keeping an eye on that as the years go by. But Aubrey, when we look at the ANC and the DA, it's had this sort of dominance within the political sphere. Are those parties still relevant in the eyes of many? Because here's the thing, right? When you speak to many of the residents, whether it's Joburg, Pretoria, Joburg, Tshwane, or Ekurhuleni, when they look at the ANC, they say the biggest sort of hindrance there is their lack of service delivery. When you look at the Democratic Alliance, they have not addressed the redress. They have not looked at addressing apartheid legacy issues. And that's where the residents and the citizens say, I really find it difficult to grasp on these two parties. And when you see the rise of other parties occurring, are we at a stage right now where the ANC and the DA may fall behind, or do they still have this relevance within the eyes of many?
Well, when you talk about elections, we miss the point.
Yes.
First of all, no election is going to deliver the kind of fundamental change that our people need. We can vote 1,000,000 times.
Yes.
No election is going to deliver that. So this idea that fundamental change is going to be delivered through an election is a misnomer. We are selling our people a dummy. But our people are not dummies. In every election, they answer your question emphatically. And they say, we don't have confidence in the capacity of an election to deliver fundamental change. And then they say something else, and they say it emphatically. We don't believe that democracy will deliver on the promise of a better life for us. How do we know they say this? In 2024, close to 70% of those who are eligible to vote did not vote. What does that tell you? And this was not the first election in which only about 30% of those who are eligible to vote turned up on voting day. It's telling us that the majority of South Africans are disengaging, not only from the electoral process, but are disengaging from the democratic process. So in their view, it doesn't matter whether it's the DA or the ANC or the DA and the ANC, they are part of the problem. Any government that they are part of is not going to deliver on the promise of a better life for all. So our people are not dummies.
But do you think that there lies my challenge, Bob Aubrey, is that political parties as a whole, politicians as a whole, especially within the major political structures of this country, seem to underestimate our people, the people of this country?
Yes.
And there lies the issue, isn't it?
Yes, they do. Now, I said to you, ours is a generalized political crisis. Our people know that. They know that the political process as currently configured is not the solution for them.
Yes.
It is not through the political process as currently configured that a better life for them is going to be delivered. And because they don't believe the political process or the democratic process will deliver on the promise of a better life for all, that is why about 70% of them stay away from elections. So we tend to look at the wrong numbers. We look at the voter turnout, which is the number of citizens who are registered to vote, who do turn up on voting day. The more important figure is the participation rate. That is the number of South Africans who are eligible to vote, registered or not, who bother to turn up on voting day. And about 70% of them last year did not turn up.
But sometimes you wouldn't blame the individuals, because if you're living in an area and you don't see your service delivery, whichever party is ruling it, they're going to look at it and say, what's the point? Now, as a patriotic South African, and I'm sure you are also, Bob Aubrey, we would like to see that very same citizen exercise his or her right. But one can understand the situation. one can understand his or her situation, that maybe when I look at the state of this country, it becomes very difficult for me to go out, put my cross to a party and expect it to occur immediately, because the political class does not deliver immediately. And that is something that I think a lot of us need to be mindful of. And it's going to be the same at the local government elections.
Let me contradict myself by calling on all South Africans to vote.
No, I agree with you on that, 100%.
Next year and in 2029. Because, yes, the political class and political parties are a constraint in relation to the capacity of the democratic process to deliver on the promise of a better life for all. But constraints are also an opportunity. So the question we must ask is this: are there any opportunities within this constraint? And if the answer is yes, how do we turn those opportunities into an opportunity to reconfigure the political process? But also, if we all vote, the outcome of an election may not be perfect, may not deliver a perfect scenario. But that imperfect scenario may create opportunities down the line in future for us to broaden our capacity to deliver on this promise of a better life for all.
We just got 30 seconds, Bob Aubrey. How do you see 2026 playing out in 30 seconds from a political spectrum?
The ANC falls below 50% at national level. It retains Buffalo City and loses the other 7 metros.
Bob Aubrey, we hope to have you again post local government elections. It's an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
As long as you have a short memory.
Yeah, no.
Bob so that Aubrey, where I'm wrong, you don't deliver, you remember.
I will definitely do my best. Bob Aubrey, absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Aubrey Matshiqi, renowned political analyst, joining us here as, of course, we wrap up the year 2025 and look ahead to 2026. For myself, Hilaal, and the rest of the team in Johannesburg, if you've missed today's episode, you'll be find it on our YouTube channel. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.